Now, the realization that one of the men in the Garissa attack was indeed a Kenyan who went to a Kenyan university and whose parents do reside in Kenya shocked many. With that revelation, the assumption that the country was now dealing with the enemy within could have made many Kenyans reconsider their perception of terror and indeed Al-Shabaab. Linda Ogutu looks at why recruitment into Al-Shabaab has now morphed into homegrown terror and options that are available for the government in dealing with that.
In October 2011, a 28-year-old man was sentenced to life in prison after he pleaded guilty to 9 charges, including causing grievous bodily harm to 2 people in 2 grenade attacks in Nairobi. Elgiva Bwire Oliacha alias Mohammed Saif was also handed another 15 years for being a member of the Al-Shabaab and 7 years for the illegal possession of grenades and guns. Hailing from Budalangi in western Kenya, Bwire's conviction was the beginning of the firm realization that recruitment into the Al-Shabaab was now crossing tribal, national and racial boundaries in Kenya.
Wakati tulisikia huyu mtu ameshikwa, tulifikiria ni mtu wa mbali na tukafurahi kwa kazi ambayo serikali ilikuwa inafanya kufuatilia watu kama hawa. Lakini tulipopata ni wa hapa, tumeshtuka.
That forced a reassessment of the nature of militants in Kenya and the admission that homegrown terror may be an issue that Kenya needs to address. Security expert Mwenda Mbijiwe says it's time Kenya started dealing with the notion of homegrown terror.
Homegrown terror is taking roots, and in fact, it may have taken roots. The dailies today are reporting that in Isiolo, over 20 families have reported that their sons went missing. We're talking of close to 20, if not more, children missing, and we don't know from what other parts of the country.
Another attack 4 years down the line, and the parading of the dead bodies of the attackers would reveal the identity of the men who killed 148 people in Garissa in what has now become one of the worst attacks in the history of Kenya. Ibrahim Abdullahi, said to be a University of Nairobi law graduate whose father is a chief in Mandera County. Apparently, Abdirahim's father had reported him missing on suspicion that he had crossed the border into Somalia. That revelation has since revealed Al-Shabaab's change of tactic in its recruitment strategy. The terror group now targets qualified individuals. Counter-terrorism expert Richard Tuter says Kenyan security forces should be worried by this emerging trend.
They also need brains, good brains. And the good brains, you can only find them in the universities and other colleges.
Radicalization must have, for it to be effective, must have a religious or a spiritual aspect. So it transcends your life from the natural to the supernatural. It moves your life from terrestrial to extraterrestrial. And the moment someone begins to be enticed with a greater, better life outside of this life, that person, no matter what you give them, they will have the best degrees, but they will have been trashed by the promise of a greater life. One of the concepts of terrorism is when you live this life, you will get 72 virgins. That is very appealing to any young man.
With the changing face of the Al-Shabaab, both men agree that the war against terror in the country has now become even more complicated because the men and women who are now being used by the terrorists are no different from anyone on the streets, all aspects considered.
They want to localize the struggle. So that the struggle now should be seen as a struggle that it's emanating from the Kenyans themselves, so that they legitimize their war.
Leaders from northeastern Kenya now say they know the identities of youth who have fallen victim to religious radicalization in the country. What's more, they say they will reveal their identities to the authorities. Question is, what is Kenya going to do about what is slowly turning out to be homegrown terror? Linda Ogutu, KTN, Nairobi.